Hello, everyone. This is Shin Godzilla 2007. I just got back from watching Godzilla Minus One, and I have to make a I have to make a movie review on this now. It's just I can't even wait till tomorrow to make this. Honestly, it's really okay. First of all, I'm gonna be doing this video in kind of two segments. I'm gonna do a spoiler-free segment first, and then I'm gonna do a kind of a deeper dive into it with spoilers. Um, the spoiler-free section is probably gonna be pretty brief, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started with it. First of all, I just want to say this really honestly, and I'm saying this as genuinely as I possibly can. This is one of the best movies I've ever watched. Just to be completely honest with you, pretty much everything about this movie is done to perfection. I honestly have no complaints about it whatsoever. The CGI is great. The effects in general are great. The human storyline is, in my opinion, the best that has ever been in a Godzilla movie. And I mean, obviously it's a Godzilla movie, so it's probably gonna shine at this anyway. But the action sequences are incredible, and all of it blends together perfectly. This movie deserves every single nomination it got in the award show, which I unfortunately forgot the name of. I think it's, and I'm probably butchering this pronunciation. I think it's called the Hochi Awards, or it's something like that. That's what it looks like. Again, I'm probably butchering that, but it really honestly just is one of the best movies I've ever watched. And I saw this in the early access fan event at a AMC theater, and it was in IMAX, which is why it's one reason I have that IMAX poster up here on the screen right now. So on top of all of that, it was even more enhanced by it being on the IMAX screen and just looking even better because of that. And then the sound was also enhanced because of IMAX. The sound design in this movie is incredible. Probably the best of any Godzilla movie I've ever watched, and maybe some of the best of any movie I've ever watched. And like I said, this really is one of the best movies I've ever seen. And I'm not, and one reason I want to state that again is because I want to state that it's not just by Godzilla movie standards. It's by all movie standards, considering all genres of movies. This movie is an incredible movie. If this movie is coming to a theater near you, you really, really should watch it. It's honestly just that good. It really is a masterpiece of a movie, which is what a lot of the reviews were saying. And I didn't look at too many reviews before I went to see the movie because I don't like to look at spoilers. I'm not a person who likes to see or hear about spoilers. But the few reviews I did look at that were spoiler free reviews, most of the people were saying that this movie is extremely good and a masterpiece of a movie, which is why it got so many nominations for awards. I don't know yet what awards it won. I saw the nominations. I didn't saw what it actually won, but let me tell you, it deserves all of those nominations. It deserves to win the awards. I'm not saying it will necessarily, but it deserves to. So that pretty much does it for the spoiler free portion of this video. There's not a whole lot I can talk about without going into extreme detail. So I'm just, and I know there's probably going to be parts of this I'm going to leave out. Just, I'm not leaving them out intentionally. I just don't want to make make the video too long. I mean, I don't want to just narrate the entire movie start to finish in a YouTube video. But I'm gonna start at the beginning because this movie starts off extremely strong with Odo Island, which I wasn't necessarily expecting Godzilla to appear as soon as he did. I knew it was a possibility, though, as soon as Odo Island showed up on the screen, the words Odo Island. But I wasn't necessarily expecting it that quick. Godzilla, in the first part of this movie, is vicious. I mean, he was out to kill people in this movie. It's not like some of the other Godzilla movies where, he's rampaging through the city just destroying the buildings and the tanks that are attacking him, and the various vehicles that are attacking him, which obviously is also killing people. But in this movie, he is out to kill people. Even in that first form that we see, which I don't know if you can call it a form. It's not like a Shin Godzilla type of thing, but it's the pre-mutated Godzilla that's still very much dinosaur-like, without the atomic breath yet, is very much out to kill people, and he succeeds at that. The first part of the movie has very much has a horror movie quality to it. Now, I mean, I'm not saying it's completely horror, but it does have a lot of horror element to it in this first scene. And going beyond just Godzilla here, moving into the human storyline a little bit, with the main character who was meant to be a kamikaze pilot and pretended his airplane didn't work so he wouldn't have to commit suicide as a kamikaze pilot. This is a very... Which I'm not saying Godzilla movies haven't been serious before. Obviously, Godzilla movies have in the past been very, very serious movies, especially the original 1954 Gojira movie. But this is very much a real thing that happened. If someone... many times, if someone came back from a kamikaze mission, either because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, or they survived because of circumstances, they were considered to be cowards. And this movie talks about that a lot and deals with that a lot. And something very interesting about this movie, which is one of the main points of the movie, is that it does address how that was very what's the word? It just wasn't very smart. It wasn't a very nice thing. And they didn't value life enough. And again, they go into this more in the movie later. They actually address this directly in the movie. They have a whole scene basically dedicated to addressing that in the past, especially in World War II, they really had not valued life enough. And, it's time to change that. Which, obviously, we're fairly far removed from World War II now, but you get the idea. So, beyond just that first scene of Godzilla in his more dinosaur-like form, the first time we get to see Godzilla as Godzilla, meaning like he's already been hit with the radiation from the atomic testing at Bikini Atoll, he's still vicious. He's still terrifying. Godzilla in this movie is a terrifying force, and it is extremely well done. Everything from his looks to just his obvious intent to kill is done extremely well. And he, just in this first part where you actually see Godzilla as Godzilla, it becomes very, very obvious, as if it wasn't obvious enough already. It becomes even more obvious when he literally just basically eats a ship. I mean, I know he didn't exactly eat it, but he basically just ate a ship, killing everyone on board, and he chases the other ship down as they're trying to kill him with the mines that they dropped off of the ship. And going into this a little bit deeper, there were several things about this movie. First of all, this movie has a lot of similarities to other movies, yet at the same time it has a lot of differences and unique approaches. And some things aren't even as much unique approaches as they are just things we haven't really gotten to see before. Like we've known about them, we've known they were there. It's just we haven't gotten to see it before. And one big part of that is that Japan is now, or not Japan as a whole necessarily, but Toho has moved from the suitmation to the CGI, which I like the suitmation. I mean, there's very nice things about it, but the CGI has allowed for a lot more, not just flexibility, but just there's a lot more that's possible with the addition of the fully CGI Godzillas, like Shin Godzilla, which wasn't necessarily full CGI, but it was mostly CGI. This Godzilla, I believe, is fully CGI. It looks fully CGI. I may be wrong about that. There may be some like motion capture or some like physical props enhanced with CGI that's going on there that I don't know about. So I may not be entirely right there, but it looks fully CGI to me. And that was I went into a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but when they blow up the mine in his mouth, he looks dead for a moment, and then he regenerates, and we actually get to see the regeneration. Now, this has somewhat been done before, but it hasn't been done to this extent before, and it hasn't been done this well before. You can really tell exactly what's happening here. Like, even if you weren't a Godzilla fan watching this, you'd be able to tell what was going on there. And it's not like in the old movies where, you know, something happens and then they have to basically narrate what's happening to you. You know what's going on. And that is, again, another advantage to the CGI Godzilla, is that you can just convey things a lot better than you can with the suitmation, which you can convey it with the suitmation. It's just a lot more difficult to do, and it's, even when you can do it, it's a lot more difficult to fully get the idea across. But yeah, they blow him up with the mine, he regenerates, he's basically about to kill all the main characters right there, just whether it be continuing what he's already in the process of doing, chasing them down, or if it's just out of anger at that point. The ship they were basically stalling time for shows up and starts shooting them with the cannons, which, by the way, explosions in this movie are done extremely well. I want to get that out there right now before I forget it. Explosions in this movie, visually and audibly, are done extremely well. Probably the best of any movie I've ever seen. Just one of many things in this movie that is the best of any movie I've ever seen. There's just a lot of extremely good things about this movie that really, I don't want to say they haven't been done before, because I feel like they have been done before, but they just haven't been executed this well before. But he basically obliterates that ship, just nuking them on the spot after he rips it apart, which, again, visually and audibly is incredible. And I know I'm gonna end up leaving some stuff out here. I'm already at 15 minutes, so I'm already basically at 15 minutes in this video, so I'm trying not to make this too long, but one thing I really need to talk about before I end the video is the first time Godzilla appears in Japan, on the Japan mainland. It doesn't last for an extremely long time, but when it's happening on screen, it is extremely effective. And this this movie. A lot of people thought it was a remake. Some people thought it was going to be like a remake of the original Gojira from 1954. It's not really a remake. In some ways, it is, but not all the way. It's not all the way a remake, but it is sort of in the same time period. Another thing this movie did that was somewhat of a unique approach is having most of it take place in 1947. As they were going through the years, coming from 1945 to 1946 and then 47, I was expecting them to progress all the way to 1954, which didn't happen, which, further, not fully, further enforces the point of it not being a remake. Like, it is somewhat of a remake, but it is still its own original movie. It's not just sticking to the 1954 original, which I think is a good thing. I think it needed to be its own original movie. I don't think just a remake would have been this effective. And elaborating on the effectivity of this movie, you have to watch it with the subtitles. I know there's not an overdub out yet anyway, but when it comes out, on DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, all that, if there is an overdub, I might watch it. I probably won't even end up watching it, to be honest, because I really don't think it would have the same effect. I just really don't think you could get the same effect that you have from the original version of this movie. And going back to that effect of the movie, back to the scene where the first time he appears on the Japanese mainland. First of all, there's more little things here that we've known about, but we haven't quite seen, at least not to the extent that we saw in this movie. Is the scene where he's attacking the trains. Now, we've seen him attack trains before, obviously. What comes to my mind immediately is the original movie Gojira in 1954 and The Return of Godzilla from 1984. Both of those show him attacking the trains, but this one really focuses on it more and makes a bigger deal out of it, especially having one of the main characters be on the train that he attacks. It makes it much more of a focus of the scene. And it makes it, to an extent, it makes it matter more. But on top of that, we're also able to see things that we weren't able to see in, let's say Godzilla 1984, Return of Godzilla. Again, really due to now progressing to the CGI over the suitmation, is that we're actually able to see more of what's happening inside the train cars. More before they would show some of it, but there was only so much they could do, because then you have to cut back to you have to cut between what's inside the train, what's inside the set of the train that they have for the people, and then cut back to the models that Godzilla is destroying. With the CGI, you don't have to do it like that. And I mean, yeah, to an extent it is sets and things like that, but it's easier to transition between the two, and there's more that you can do with it because it's CGI. And that was one of that's not the best scene of the movie, but that was one of the most well done scenes of the movie, where she's, her character is hanging on the I forgot what those things are called, but it's like the bars in the train that people hold on to in like subways when they stand up, those things. And yeah, that's just something we haven't really got to see before and really dive into before. So that was an interesting thing. And something that somebody I went with pointed out too, that I was not really thinking about when I was watching the movie, but I was thinking about it after they had mentioned this to me, that in a lot of the Godzilla movies, especially from like the Heisei era, show a lot of the military getting into position almost more than they actually showed them fighting Godzilla. And in this movie, as soon as they attack, they're just attacking. They're there and they're fighting. There's just all of a sudden you see explosions on Godzilla and then the tanks are there. It's very good cinematography, and there's not I'm not saying that the time in the Heisei era doing that was wasted, but it feels a lot more clean, if that makes sense. And another thing I really like in this movie that has to do with that whole sequence is the atomic breath. They make the atomic breath especially powerful in this movie. Not as if it wasn't already powerful enough. It has an actual nuclear explosion in this movie. And, you know, we kind of see the same thing in GMK. They have the scene where I think it's the first, maybe it may not be the first scene, but it's the scene where he fires his atomic breath in the city, and then they cut to the school and they're looking out the window and they see the giant mushroom cloud. If you watch GMK, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's kind of like that, except in this movie, his atomic breath is always that powerful. It's not one thing just for a special scene. Or for just one scene. It's like every time he uses his atomic breath. This Godzilla is just that powerful. Now, I'm not just going to come out and say that it's the most powerful Godzilla that's ever been in a movie before, because, you know, that's probably still up for debate. And there'll be some other channels that can analyze that better than I can, because there's some people that specialize more in that kind of thing. But they did do a very good job of expressing how powerful this Godzilla actually is. And the sequence to him actually firing his atomic breath, I love too. It builds a lot of anticipation, kind of like the atomic breath in Godzilla 2014, where it's building up his spines until it gets to his head and then he unleashes the atomic breath. It's somewhat like that. It's actually, in my opinion, a little bit better because of the way they do it. It's a little bit more elaborate. Not that 2014's isn't good or elaborate on its own. It's just this one possibly did it better. At least this is my opinion at the moment. This was my first time viewing the movie, so, you know, I'm honestly just in amazement at this movie right now. It was really an incredible experience, especially seeing it in IMAX and it being the early access fan event, so being one of the first people in the US that got to see it, or among the first groups of people that got to see it in the US. And it doesn't, his atomic breath, going back to this scene again, his atomic breath doesn't just have the look of a nuclear explosion, but it has the effect of it too. First of all, his atomic breath traveling to the impact location where it actually impacts with the ground is literally vaporizing buildings. It's not even touching the building. Well, it may have touched some of them, but it's not even really targeting or hitting the buildings. It's just merely its presence there is vaporizing the buildings. That's how powerful it is. And then obviously once it gets to its impact location and the actual atomic explosion takes place, it is like an atomic bomb. I mean, not just with the fireball, but with the shockwave. It basically destroys the entirety of Shinagawa. At least I think it was in Shinagawa at the time. And, it's at this point in the movie where you think the female lead is dead, which I apologize for not saying their actual names. I can't remember right now. I'm very tired. That movie was a lot. I really need to look and see. But yeah, and then even after that, they do a very good job of conveying the post explosion, post atomic explosion effects, not only on the characters but on the area around it, and how there is an actual term for this. I unfortunately forgot what it is. There is an actual term for this, but the black rain that starts pouring down from the sky right after he thinks he's lost Sabiko. And that whole part of that scene in general is done really well, where he is, on the ground screaming at Godzilla. It feels like true emotion. It's just, not only is the directing good and the story good, but the acting is incredible in this movie. I mean, like I was saying earlier, it just all comes together and all blends so perfectly. I mean, not only is it all good individually, but it blends so well. It's really hard. I'm sorry if I'm sounding like I'm repeating myself. It's a very difficult movie to put into words. You really just have to watch it to understand what I'm talking about. Which I'm assuming most of you have, since you're watching the spoiler portion of this video. But just in case you haven't, I mean, it's really just not even possible to fully explain it in words, and you just really have to see it yourself. And fast forward a little bit further because this video is about to be 30 minutes long. Fast and forward a little bit further in that movie. The kamikaze, or not the kamikaze, but where he decides he's going to do a kamikaze run on Godzilla, and he's gotten his former plane engineer Tachibana, I think that's how you say his name. He's gotten him to, come and fix that plane up, and he's ready to, or he says he's ready to kamikaze run on Godzilla. He is. It's just, that's, if you've watched the movie, that's not what ends up happening. But the fact that his plane engineer, who originally blamed him for the Odo Island incident and blamed him for, or basically called him a coward for not following through on his original kamikaze mission. The fact that he's the one who tells him to basically, he puts the ejector seat in the plane and tells him to live his life is really a beautiful ending to that movie, or at least to that storyline in the movie. And going to the actual scene of Godzilla's demise, or at least his demise for the time being, where he, ejects from the plane but aims it into Godzilla's mouth and his head explodes. It makes sense. It's not like an oxygen destroyer level thing, and it's obviously not a permanent fix, since at the end of the movie we see him regenerating. But yeah, it makes sense, especially given that he realized earlier in the movie that he could be damaged more from the inside, even though he would regenerate, as we saw earlier in the movie. But yeah, they work together to destroy Godzilla. Which, by the way, the plan they come up with is very unique. I was expecting the oxygen destroyer. I was not expecting what they did, and I actually would like to give them some praise for coming up with an original idea for it instead of just using the oxygen destroyer. Now, the oxygen destroyer is a good concept and everything. I like the oxygen destroyer. I like the original Gojira movie, but I liked seeing another original approach to defeating Godzilla, which in this case was the Freon, using the Freon canisters or whatever those were called to sink him, pressurize him, hopefully to crush him, and then if that didn't work, float him back to the surface and basically just expand his body until he just exploded, which obviously ended up not working, and that's where the kamikaze comes in. The kamikaze run comes in. But yeah, and then using the other two ships as bait. I don't remember if that was hinted at earlier in the movie or not when they were actually planning the attack. It may have been, and I may have just missed it. If it wasn't, that was an interesting surprise, and it was a good way to counter the atomic breath, since they figured out that it took time to recharge and everything. But yeah, this movie, I keep mixing up words today. This video is already 32 minutes long, so I'm gonna try to wrap it up here real quick. I'm probably gonna make another video on this movie that's basically just a part two to this review, because there's a lot more I could talk about, and I just don't necessarily have a lot of time to talk about right now, because like I said, I am tired. It is pretty late, and that movie was a lot. It's really a lot to take in, to be honest, in multiple ways. It is a very emotional movie. I don't know that I've really conveyed that part of it yet, but the director did a very good job of making sure that the emotion was conveyed well in the movie, that it did play a big part in the movie, and it did. It was done very well, like pretty much everything in the movie. But yeah, the last thing I'm going to talk about before I wrap this video up, and again, I probably will make basically a part two to this, is the very end where we see, what's left of Godzilla start to regenerate. Do I think that means there will be sequels? Probably. Now, I know I can't say for sure, because, look at Shin Godzilla, it was set up for a sequel, which in the end didn't happen. Well, it was kind of set up for a sequel. It really could have gone either way, but it was set up pretty well for a sequel, and it didn't end up going that direction. But in this movie, I think they really have set it up for a sequel. I think there most likely will be at least one more. Now, as far as what monsters they would possibly bring in and stuff like that, I can't even begin to theorize on that right now, because for one, like I said, I'm pretty tired right now, and I'm not the best at thinking at the moment. And two, I'm just, at the moment, I don't really know how they would bring other monsters into it. I mean, they would have to, introduce them in another way, but they haven't necessarily provided a way in this movie to just introduce them right away. I mean, you could couple them with the, nuclear testing like you have Godzilla. I'm just not sure if that's what they're gonna do or not. But anyway, I am gonna wrap up the video now because at this point I'm just rambling. I'm gonna think about this some more, and then I'm probably gonna make a part 2 soon. But I want to go ahead and rate the movie now on a scale of 1 to 10, which, as you can tell from how I've been talking about this movie, it is an easy 10, easily a 10. If I could rate it higher than a 10, I would, but I am using a scale of 1 to 10, so that is as high as I could go. But if I could rate it even higher than that, I would. So this is an absolutely must-watch movie, especially for Godzilla fans. Even if you're not a Godzilla fan, this movie is just so good in every way that you really, really should watch it. Anyways, that's going to be all for this video. Again, I'm probably going to make a part 2 pretty soon. And yeah, I'll see you all next time.